Our 218th visit together as friends and sisters begins with a replay of episode 113. I rewatched it this morning. It's about 20 minutes long, not super long. And I was enthusiastic. I looked thin and healthy. And it was this wonderful podcast, very uplifting, about some longtime friends that I have in my life. And for the most part, those women remain longtime friends. But a couple of them I have nothing to do with now, which led me to a blog that I wrote about sisters, chosen sisters and chosen family. Because the two women that I mentioned in the podcast, I also wrote about in this blog, and we have no connection now whatsoever. And while it was difficult at the time, almost a year later for one of them and a year and a half later for the other, my life is definitely better. That does not mean these people are bad people. It just means how I was allowing myself to be treated wasn't a healthy thing. And when those things get challenged, those are the friends that disappear. In this episode of Spilling the Tea, or this season of Spilling the Tea, I've had some inner conflict because I don't want to seem cranky or vindictive. Carolina, my entrepreneurial coach and therapist, and I had a wonderful conversation today about how much of a process this podcast is for me. And so here's what I'm processing in replaying episode 113 and having several new episodes that will follow. A theme in my life has been one of being told to keep secrets or to be quiet. The number of times it comes up in my life from primarily authority figures as a youngster, and then I created these authority figures as I got older. It was my job to keep secrets. So I had to keep secrets about my father molesting me. And I did. I didn't tell people for a long time. My mother remarried. I didn't say anything. I didn't let my siblings know. I didn't let, on and on and on. People didn't know. Always, it was my job to keep all this buried. And probably the person that asked me to do that the least of the time was Norm, was my dad. But I certainly was expected to keep the secrets and to keep neat everything that secret exposure might mess up. And I had a lot of resentment and anger around being the one to plan a funeral and write a eulogy. I've talked about all of this, but it illustrates several recurring themes in my life and the questions that these recurring themes bring up. I use the analogy of chasing a boy. So I'm constantly chasing the boy that gives me enough bait to keep chasing him, but doesn't really want me because he backs out all the time or doesn't treat me very well. And the more this happens, the harder I try. The little bits he'll give me fill me with euphoria, and so I keep trying. Meanwhile, over here are two or three other boys that are wonderful boys that wouldn't do the baiting and the switching and the mistreating. And I seem to have no interest in them. I have relationships with several CrossFit gyms, and I oftentimes put one of the gyms ahead of the others because I so desperately want to be recognized there. And while that gym could say, yes, we recognize you and appreciate you and love you, actions and coworkers' actions indicate otherwise. I come out of there always feeling a bit anxious and unhappy, and yet I stay. Now, I could give you a big, long list of reasons why it's good that I stay. But why do I allow myself to get sucked into that cycle of treatment? Why do I not step back and just say, okay, I'm done. I'm good. But I don't. I continue to try. I do this with friendships. And I've talked a lot about Steph in the charter school and Robin and Flips and how devastating those relationships were. I talk about my relationship with Roy and how his massive show of love and affection and then massive show of deceit and anger and humiliation and degradation would make me work twice as hard to get the love again. And then when I got it again, it's just this vicious cycle. A couple of weeks ago, I talked about why women or girls who are sexually abused grow up to date older men or recreate secretive relationships, the habits they get into. And it all goes back to the trauma response, which is fight or flight. But there's more to it than fight or flight. Fight or flight really accurately describes men, male-bodied people. They are designed to either run for safety or to turn around and fight. And they're willing to fight to the death. It's in the hard wiring, which is why in a deep woods setting with living in tribes of people, the women stayed and protected and kept safe and built fortresses around the children. And the men went out with the spears and such and did the hunting and fought the intruders. We're hardwired this way. So after fight or flight, there is freeze and fawn. So freeze is what I did when I was being molested. I froze. I stayed still. I made believe I was asleep. Fawn is how hard I worked to make my dad love me so that he wouldn't do it again. And this cycle can become so ingrained that it's almost like Stockholm syndrome, which is the syndrome where kidnap victims who are held hostage, kept contained, develop strong reliance and love and desire to please their captors. It's not because it's a healthy thing, but they realize it's an element of survival, and not just physical survival, but emotional and mental survival. So in retelling stories, the story isn't worth retelling if there isn't a lesson learned in it, if there isn't a reason to retell the story, if there isn't something I need to process. So right now, I'm going to have you go ahead and listen to episode 113. And then I'm going to come back when you're done, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on it and what I've learned from it and what I learned from re-listening to it and where I stand with friendships in my life right now. Chosen friends, chosen sisters, enjoy the listen. Hey, everybody. Barb Higgins here, welcoming you in my disheveled state to episode 113 of 1,000 Tiny Steps. 13 is a tender number for me, Molly's age, day that I got married. So episode 113 is about friendship, sort of allowing the universe or God or those loved ones on the other side to guide us into meeting the people we're supposed to meet. So I put off recording this because I haven't really known what I was going to talk about. I woke up this morning just with no idea. I actually tried to record it yesterday, which would have been Friday the 20th. So it's Saturday the 21st, and a really big thing happened today. My book arrived. So if you're watching me, I'm leaning over and I'm showing you a line of copies of Motherland behind me. My heart's pounding still because this is just a big moment. By now, you will have seen the video of me opening it, and it won't be big news at all anymore. But it's right now, my tummy's in knots. So I'm glad I waited for today to record the podcast because these had not arrived yesterday. A couple of other things happened today. I spent some time with a friend of mine named Susan Buchanan. Susan is a friend of mine from Amesbury. I met her in that professional women's group that I joined. And she is just one of those unique souls that I'm not surprised at all now that I know and spend time with. She's wonderful. She has a big heart for those who need help. She reminds me of Molly in this way, and Gracie too. She sort of mentors this young boy. And so I met her in downtown Concord with 4 boys that play on an AAU basketball team that have a tournament here in Concord. And I brought them to Dos Amigos for a yummy Mexican lunch. It was great. And we walked all around downtown Concord and talked and shared. And I always learn something new when I spend time with Susan. And so what we shared today was something that was came to her like on social media. And it's sort of a prayer, and I'm going to read it off my phone. So bear with me if you're watching. It won't be pretty. So it says, Spirit guides, allies, ancestors, and divinity. I ask for your guidance for what's appropriate for me. I ask for your blessings upon this day. I ask to make known my true will's way. Blessings of happiness, blessings of health, blessings of wisdom, blessings of wealth, blessings of pleasure, blessings of fun, blessings from the stars, moon, earth, and sun, blessings of protection, blessings of peace, blessings from the north, south, west, and east, so that the work of my will be unimpeded, so my impact is beneficial where it is needed, as above, so below, as within, so without, so might it be, and so it is. This reminds me a lot of my friend Karen Kenny, who's a spiritual mentor, and she does the Karen Kenny Show, which is a podcast I listen to every week. And she always ends hers with a prayer similar to this that basically says, please show me where I'm supposed to go and show me who I'm supposed to meet and help me say what I'm supposed to say. It's a little bit of a giving over of your ego self to the greater will of the universe. And that doesn't mean the universe bosses us around. It just means that there's a power bigger than ourselves and our individual desires and needs. And if we can be a vessel, then that's helpful. One of my favorite Baha'i writings starts with, make of me a hollow reed through which, and I don't remember the rest, but what I always remember in that opening line, make of me a hollow reed, is that we're supposed to be a vessel through which good can come, as opposed to a block that keeps the good out. And so I just liked it. And so we're standing in rainy downtown Concord on Main Street, chatting away about life, and she plays this for me. Another friend is in my mind today, and her name is Roberta Anthis. And for years, she was the women's track coach at Rutgers University. And I never knew her when I was a runner. She's a little bit older than me, but not much. I met her as a collegiate athlete. I was at BU and she was coaching at Rutgers, a very young coach then. And all the years I worked at Princeton camp, the running camp at Princeton, Roberta was just, down the road. And so she would come often and lead running groups and be a part of camp. And we became really good friends. And she knew all the ins and outs and struggles that I went through at that time. That was also the first time I got sober. And Roberta is someone that doesn't drink. And so she and I would hang out a lot because when you're around a bunch of people getting drunk, it's just hard to do that all by yourself. Although I had a much easier time of it back then because I had never become a daily drinker. But Roberta was my person, and she is an English major and has such a classic grasp of the English language. Conversations with her are fun. Several years ago, like almost 20 years ago now, she left Rutgers and moved across the country, met this wonderful person who she's still with now, and he had a daughter. So really, she needed to make the move, and she gave up a coaching career and moved across the country. And listen to me how I say that. Oh my God, she gave up a career for a person. Well, sometimes if it's the right person, it's the right thing to do. In a day where social media is now the way people stay connected, Roberta and I have sort of fallen off the wagon with communication. But it comes and goes, and we just communicate via our AOL email addresses, which I love. I don't use my AOL so much anymore, but I will always use it with Roberta. We've been back and forth, and she didn't realize I had started a podcast. I mean, I think she knew all of these things, but when you're not connected, you don't know how to find them. So I put her on my mailing list, and we've emailed back and forth several times, and she's listening to the podcasts and reading the emails. And it's funny, I just assume that people I've known for a long time know everything about me, and she's finding out all sorts of new things. And I'm telling stories about myself that I thought she already knew. With this comes a renewed sense of connection, but it also makes me anxious because when we share photos of our friendship, it was like 5 lifetimes ago. Most of my friendship occurred before I'd ever been married. And then within my marriage to Eric, and then my divorce, and then having Gracie and Molly, meeting Kenny, and the beginning of that life. And I just look back on that Barb as such a different version of who I am now. And I look at that Barb as mostly only knowing happy things, and then in come Amy and Roy and the job loss, and then Molly's death and all that went along with that. I'm just a different person now. But these friendships, certain friendships stand the test of these trials and tribulations, and Roberta is one of them. And so I just have this excitement in my heart around friendship. And so it just gets me thinking. So the third friend that I'll bring up in this episode is my longtime friend from middle school on, Deb Stanley. If you've read my book, then you've seen her name in the acknowledgments. And she's another one who, we're very opposite. I'm quite opposite from Roberta. I'm in many ways quite opposite from Susan. But what draws us together is a very, very strong, keen understanding of the universe, and that we're all a small piece in a much bigger picture, and that we all play our part, and that we're all connected. I go by Barb all the time now. And I was messaging back and forth with Deb the other night, and she said, well, I will always know you and call you Barbara. I got warm with that because that's how she met me and knew me, Barbara. I didn't really go by Barb when I was in high school. I was Barbara Higgins. That's what I went by. I didn't really become Barb until after college. In college, I went by Higgins. No one called me Barb or Barbara. I was just called Higgins. And then I think Barb came in my adult life, and it was sort of like me taking ownership of my name and deciding that Barb was who I am. My name is Barbara. My name is Barbara, but who I am is Barb. And so in my sort of online entrepreneurship, coaching, therapy sessions with Carolina, she's helped me identify and name the different aspects of my personality. Barb is me, Barb mode. I can remember early in my friendship with Robin, we would say, you've been #barbed. And it's just, you've gotten advice from me or mentorship or something that's good. And that's been a good thing. And so when I introduce myself now, I'm Barb. On the cover of my book here, it doesn't say Barbara Higgins, it says Barb Higgins. That's important to me. It's sort of who I am, I think. I went back and forth on the whole Barbara thing. Like, well, because Barbara is the name that I assigned the child in me, the people pleaser, the one who let people walk all over her. And, that version of Barb. She's connected to Fifi, who is like my inner child. When Deborah calls me Barbara, I don't mind. Now, I never call Deborah. One more friend that comes to mind today is my friend Taylor. Now, Taylor, interestingly enough, knows Susan. She's a part of this professional circle of women who have been in and out of one another's lives. And Taylor is designing our kitchen. And Taylor has this innate ability to reach out to me and say, hey, you were on my head this morning. You were in my heart this morning. So I had you in my prayers, or I'm reaching out, and 99.9% of the time, she is spot on that a message from her has been helpful. And I've talked a lot recently about all the changes in my house, the kitchen remodel, the tree coming down, the landscaping. And so now we have these start dates for everything. The landscaping starts Monday, which will be the 23rd of October. I have a giant backhoe in my yard, which is Jack's delight in this new plaything. I'm sure by now you will have seen pictures of him on my social media and in my blogs. That starts the 23rd. And then a week later on October 30th starts the kitchen. And our life will become very different for a couple of months, which is wonderful and terrifying all at the same time. As I sit here, my book release is in 3 days, and I'm wonderful and terrified at the same time. All of these things in my life are happening that terrify me. And when I look at my circle of friends right now, or the friends that I've been in constant connection with, the last but not least would be Polly, who for some reason reached out today. And so she may have a need from me, but I could use some Polly time as well. I realized that whether the universe is Molly, whether the universe is my great aunt Connie and my Nana Quimby, these are people that come through in readings all the time for me. Whether the universe is Baha'u'llah or Abdul Baha, whether the universe is anyone else, I realize that somebody is setting this up for me so that I am taken care of, so that I am speaking with and talking with and doing what I need to do to manage the days. All of these people, with the exception of Taylor and Susan, are people that I've known for years, for my entire life. I've known Polly since I was a teenager. I've known Roberta since I was in my early 20s. I've known Deborah since I was 12. These are lifelong friends that have watched me and experienced and navigated with me the ups and downs of my life. I've had a very hard time lately trusting people, and I think I have some very good reasons why that might be true. In all of my reading, online reading research around trauma, recovery, PTSD, success, if you want to be successful, lots and lots of readings and authors and coaches and therapists have you look at the list of people that you surround yourself with. Who's in your life, your family, your friends, your coworkers, and narrow it down to the 5 people you see the most. And who are those people? Because that's the barometer. That's the measure of how successful or unsuccessful, how happy or sad, how healthy or unhealthy you might be. So you look at the people that you surround yourself with. A couple of weeks ago, I was just sort of scrolling through my text messages, and I have spent so much of my adult life since texting became a thing, spending hours on my phone texting people, whether it was Roy or my social circle, making plans to go out and do things with people, whether it was coworkers. I spent a lot of time online calling or texting friends, and I had a very, very active life outside of my house. Now, having a baby at 57 certainly puts a damper on that, but I've noticed with all of the things that have happened, so Jack's birth, starting the podcast, writing the book, the fiasco in Bow, the fiasco with the charter school in Concord, the service learning school, all of these things that some would say I bring them on myself, right? I attract the drama. Well, maybe I do, but I'm not the drama. I attract it. What I'm attracted to is people that encourage drama in their lives and then try to pin it on people like me. And so when I look at 2 or 3 years ago, prior to Jack, the 5 people that I was surrounding myself with, it's not surprising that I was in a state of constant sort of trauma and not able to manage my life because I was surrounded by people that were bringing all that negativity into my life. So I've pulled back. And if I had to say who are the 5 people I surround myself with the most, it would be my CrossFit community. It would be the coaches at Battle CrossFit and the coaches at CrossFit Amesbury and the people that go to those gyms. I've pulled much way back from my Amoskeag CrossFit friends, not because they're negative at all, but I have found that in regard to me being healthy, that isn't a place that made me feel like I was supported and loved. That's not an insult on that community. We don't all fit in everywhere we go. And so in pulling back from there and opening myself up more to other CrossFit realities, I have regained my excitement and love for the sport. But even those people aren't the ones I spend the most time with now. When I think of my energy and who I'm thinking about, if I look at the last 2 weeks of my life, I think of Virginia, my ghostwriter and co-author. I think of Roberta, my wonderful running friend from years ago. I think of Polly, who's been my other half, the Laverne to my Shirley, the Doris to my May, the Thelma to my Louise, I think of Deb, who never stopped coming around and coming by and supporting me. And I think now of Taylor and Susan, people who only know the broken Barb from after Molly's death. They only know this Barb, and they understand all the crazy that led up to Molly's death. They understand the connections with Roy and what that was like for me. They understand all of it, and they love me anyway. And I look at how important that is to me. And on a day like today, where the most exciting thing is that I'm holding an actual real live book in my hand, and how this is equal parts wonderful and terrifying is driving me. And right now I'm surrounded by people who love the me of me, whether they know me as Barbara or Higgins or Barb, whether they knew me 50 years ago or 5 years ago or 2 years ago. What I share with these people is this unbelievable drive for love and for peace and for kindness, quite honestly. I don't always 100% agree with any of these women, but we're not supposed to. I'm me and they're them. 24 hours ago, I had a couple of hours to myself to record a podcast, and I had no idea what I wanted to talk about. I didn't know where I was. I didn't know what was coming. And now I'm just really, really just, I feel like I'm floating in a beautiful crystal clear pool of friendship and love. And I know that sounds hokey, but I look at that prayer and how basically all I said to the universe was, please give me something to talk about. Where am I at? What is it I need to share? So I'm not an advice giver. I don't do this podcast to tell you how to be. But I do know that sometimes when people make suggestions to me, really helps me to solidify why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling or what's going on in my head. And I know that when I sink myself into thoughts of why, if only, how could they, oh no. And even when I get sad looking back on the past, like Roberta sent me some pictures of us at Princeton camp, and I was 30 years old. I look like a child. I thought I was so old at 30, right? I just think back to all that was behind me at that time, but I had no idea what would be ahead of me and how traumatizing a lot of it would be. And I have these amazing connections and these women that range in age from, well, actually, this particular group of women, I think Taylor's the baby of the group. I think she's just 50. And then the rest of us are well in our 50s and 60s. But I just have such gratitude and thankfulness for these friendships. So if I were going to suggest that you do something, buy my book if you haven't, or borrow it from someone and read it. It isn't even about buying it. Just read it and find out about Molly. But the biggest thing I would say is sit back for a minute and think about who you spend your most time with, whether it's with virtually, whether it's with in your head, whether it's texting or talking on the phone, whether it's spending time. And I eliminate from my day-to-day life, Gracie, Kenny, Molly, my mom, the people that I run into regularly. I have a little control over that sometimes. But when I think of the people in my life that I'm facilitating a relationship with, who are they? And if they're not healthy, if they're kind of toxic people, then what's going on with that? And why is that happening? Gracie was just in a relationship, and the patterns that I noticed there were just reminiscent of every sort of quote unquote poor friend choice I've made in my entire life. And I didn't see it. I love the fact that I can not only learn from the friendships I make, but the friendships I facilitate or the friendships in others that I'm drawn to. It's just interesting to me. On what for me is a cloudy, rainy, sort of gray October day, be good to yourself. Sit back and think about your friends, good friends that you see a lot, good friends you haven't seen in years. Think about what they do for you, and do they bring happiness and joy to your life? Think about a mantra or a prayer that you might listen to and say that a few times. Just be good to yourself. Be good to others. I think for me, sometimes the hardest thing for me is not being judgy. And I don't think I'm outwardly judgmental, but I do know that I can be inwardly judgmental, and I don't like being judged. And so this has been a major piece for me, is trying to live in gratitude. What am I supposed to learn from something that's bothering me or is offensive to me? And that's how I'm good to others. And as always, even when it's gray and rainy, have a good day, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the listen. I had really wonderful things to say about all my friends in this episode. And I will say right now, in 2025, 2 years after I recorded that episode, I am still good friends with Susan. I am still good friends with Roberta. I am good friends with Deb. I have other good friends in my life as well. Lisa from CrossFit, who I wrote about in my article here, and Pam from CrossFit. They remain solid connections for me. I am friendly now with a woman named Renee that I've also known for a long time. all of my friendships, the ones that are long lasting that have maintained since this episode aired, and the ones that I talk about that I didn't include in this episode, exhibit one key difference from the people I'm no longer friends with, and is that they do not have within them any sort of narcissistic tendencies. I hesitate to use the word because it's so overused, but when I look at the behaviors of two friends who I no longer speak to, Polly and Taylor, when I look back over the history of the friendship, without using a podcast summary to badmouth anybody, what I notice in myself is my constant and increasingly frenetic desire, the more time I spent with each of them, to make sure they love me, to please them, to help them. Taylor did my kitchen. She was in charge of that, and really working together and all the stress that went around a job of that magnitude and how much it fell apart and how I spent about $100,000 more than we budgeted, and how, as beautiful as my kitchen is right now, there are things in it that I do not like. And I was clear that I didn't like them and was really, really guided and told that she was the designer and this is what would look right. This is what would be beautiful. Well, I think a beautiful kitchen is fine, but if you don't like it, it doesn't matter how beautiful somebody thinks it is. The things with Taylor that were similar to Roy and to Steph and to Robin was the shift when suddenly the behaviors that she explained that she had exhibited to others in her life that had hurt her were now being directed to me. And I talked about it last week in the restraining order episode, that sudden realization like, oh my God, they're doing it to me. Oh my gosh, they're doing it to me. And Taylor left the job and really ceased speaking with me months before it was finished, and reached out only once or twice when she saw a post or something on social media that made her uncomfortable about people thinking she didn't do a good job. The kitchen is beautiful. She's a very talented designer. But it was when she went out of her way to send me a post, a meme. It was bone chilling, and I think I've spoken of it before. I shared it with my therapist. I shared it with a couple of friends just secretly, and all of them, eyes wide. This is the person that did this on purpose to hurt you and to threaten you and to put you in your place. I responded to that meme with, wow, I'm blown away that this is where your brain goes and that you actually spent time putting this together to hurt me. Wow. And that was it. I have not written back. I have some changes coming up in my kitchen that I need to make that could potentially require me to reach out to her on a professional level. We'll see how that goes. Taylor wasn't in my life a long time. So while I have heartache over the loss of the friendship and embarrassment and anger over the mistreatment, it's not a loss that I feel as deeply as I feel the next loss. But it's still a life lesson for me. I acquiesced to things in my kitchen project that I knew I didn't like or didn't want because I wanted to appease her. I wanted her to like me. I wanted her to be glad that she took on my kitchen. Working with her cost me damaged a couple of other relationships in my life that I've had to work hard to fix, to repair, and related to the kitchen on a professional level. That's been hard for me. In my blog that I wrote about the same time as this episode came out, 113, I was writing about my chosen sisters. I wrote about my actual sisters and then chosen sisters. And so I have Taylor, a relatively new sister to me. We connected over child loss. We then shared our similar history of physical catastrophe and recovery. She has an entrepreneurial spirit that guides me in my online journey. She loves Jack and is a mom of boys. When the spirit talks to her, she listens. Her flower shop is a favorite stop for Jack. He touches the dirt and the plants and takes in the warmth of the greenhouse. She checks in on me when I need it most. She is my spirit guide. That's what I wrote about her. And when I think of the good things in my relationship with Taylor, I get very sad about this. But I realize that even if we were to talk all of this out, my hunch is it wouldn't take long for the dance to begin again. And I say this because the other friend I no longer have any contact with is Polly. And this is not new. There have been 2 other times before this time where Polly and I stopped talking to one another for months and months, a couple of years even. One was over money, and that was sort of a mutual, we just stopped talking to one another, and communication around the money. Don't lend friends money. Don't rent properties to people you know. These things just get ugly. Money is ugly. And then the other one was around just boundaries with friendships and my inability to go to her mom's funeral, and me having Jack. I didn't quite understand it, but I gave space. Both times that we reconnected centered around a tragic event. So we hadn't spoken for several years, and then Colleen died. And so Polly and I and a group of other Baha'is gathered and became Colleen's girls. And we went to hospice every day, and we stayed with her as she made her transition. And so we started being friends again. And that lasted quite a long time. I mean, on again, mostly on again, quite honestly. It was me raising Molly and Gracie, so I was busy a lot. We didn't have a ton of time to see one another or be connected. Mostly social, and we were fine for years and years. We did have a couple of falling outs, and always our falling outs are around boundaries and my inability to have boundaries. Freeze, fawn, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, 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 fawn. Something in Polly I love desperately and want her to like me and love me. And it fuels again and again me setting up situations that allow her to cross a boundary that I don't feel is healthy for me. That's how I feel. Some of the most significant people in her life are people she met through me in ways that I find odd, that she feels it's okay to put herself so deeply into their lives. These people enjoy these friendships, so it's not mine to judge. It's unsettling for me. The thing that got us back together after she got mad at me about her mom and Jack was she had some a tumor and needed surgery and needed a lot of support and help. And so again, Colleen's girls got together to help Polly. I gave her a significant amount of money, tons of gift cards, rides, all sorts of things, because it's the right thing to do. And I love Polly. And we slowly began sort of a friendship again. And you know, I have a baby, so it was hard to carve out a lot of time. She didn't want anything to do with Jack initially, and she was very clear about that. But then she was whole hog, and she really made an effort to connect with Jack. This is the piece that is similar to how Robin and this woman, Laura Lynn, who have stepped back in friendships with me and then just ghosted Gracie. So she really developed a relationship with Jack. So I had Polly house sit for me when we went to Florida a couple of years back. And I made a list of things I just asked of her. And, you know, she had her dog here. I'm allergic to dogs. I'm like, please have the house cleaned and have everything out when we get back. And she didn't. We came home to the dog still here and the place a mess, and her needing to go someplace and leaving all the stuff. And it was unsettling and frustrating, but not surprising. I don't think Polly's malicious. I just think she knows I'll put up with it. And so my therapist said, don't reach out like this anymore. This isn't somebody who's respecting your boundaries. And so what did I do last year before we were heading off to Indonesia? I offered my house for Polly to, again, house sit with her dog that was having surgery. I also drove her to Boston to a doctor's appointment, paid for the gas, paid for the, you know, and I was happy to do these things. I know that she would make it sound like I take from her and that I'm unsafe and I don't offer her safety in expressing herself. So in the weeks leading up to us leaving for Bali, she was really hurting financially, and I offered her a job and had her paint for me, paint over at Coach's and do some painting here. She was in my driveway one day and I came up and said, hey, how's it going? And 20 minutes of being yelled at about the cheap quality of the paint and how it's ruining her brushes and I'm too good for this and I don't need this. And I was a bit dumbfounded because, you know, Kenny and I could have painted. I didn't need to pay someone to do it, but she needed the financial support and I wanted the job done. So we bought hundreds of dollars worth of paint that she picked out and approved. And then in about a week, you know, in the weeks leading up to Indonesia, my dad died and my mom was going to be spending a significant amount of time here at the house. We're gone for a month. And this was not okay with Polly. She just was furious. She was going to have to share my house with my mother. And, you know, part of me understands she has a routine for the dog, but I guess she thought she was doing me a big favor by staying here. I thought I was doing her a favor by giving her a big, beautiful house to live in for a month. And so she came a little bit ahead, and I was trying very hard to navigate the balance between my mother and Polly. And every scenario I came up with, Polly's like, no, that's not reasonable. No, I can't do that. No, no. And my mom was sitting here listening to all this, which I think Polly didn't realize for a chunk of it that she was here. Basically, she stormed off and said, this is triggering my PTSD. I'm out. So I'm sure it was triggering. It was a lot of yelling. I was angry. She'd had drinks. Kenny had not followed through on a couple of things. I was stressed to the max. I wasn't at my best. I spent several hours putting together just a list of expectations and agreements on both my mother's and Polly's parts. And I said, I have these here. Could you just come by and take a look? To which she didn't. And then just days before the trip said, I'm not going to bring the dog. I don't feel safe. I can't bring you to the airport. So we made all these arrangements and we switched things. The hardest part of all this for me was the communicating between me and Kenny, as if we're not going to share our communication. There were some financial incongruities and just expectations that were communicated differently to him and to me. We're coming up on a year. It's November and we went to Indonesia in early December. Do I miss that friendship? Yes. Here's what I wrote about it. I have Polly. We have known one another longer than we can recall. We have both answered the phone in the middle of the night and bailed each other out. We have shared sobriety and the opposite of that. We have shared physical illness and setbacks. We have shared loss. We share a love for Baha'u'llah and his teachings. She is my anchor in a stormy sea. So in my anchor and my spirit guide, those are two pretty intense descriptors for friends that are no longer in my life. I do not share this to disparage either of them. I am sure if they were on a podcast or on sharing their side of the story, they would feel very passionately about their feelings about me. I would love to have resolution in both of these situations. I don't believe that I will. And that's fine. I can have resolution in my heart. I can have self-forgiveness and forgiveness of Polly and Taylor. The two other women I wrote about here were my friend Lisa and my friend Pam, both from CrossFit. Both of them share rigorous honesty, no fear of people judging them for what they say because they're going to be truthful and speak their truth. It was Pam who reminded me in this particular season not to hold a grudge or be vindictive in my sharing or retelling of stories. So how am I with friends right now? I am reluctant and reticent. And that's how I finished this blog post 2 years ago, before these two very traumatic friendship losses occurred. I wrote, I am tentative now when it comes to making friends. I am too easily drawn in and manipulated. I can be the poster child for the song from The Music Man called There's a Sucker Born Every Minute. I am learning. I am moving slowly now in my social connections. Now, these two women were established social connections at this time. I didn't think what happened would happen. But again, when I look back now, I'm not surprised. I watch more with my ears now and listen with my eyes. I plant my feet firmly in the soil of love and feel where my branches grow. I look for truth in the stillness and leave space to wonder, whose sister am I? So if I were to do a podcast episode on the power of friendship now, I would talk about Lisa and Pam still. I would talk about Susan. Our friendship has grown in many ways since the podcast and blog. I don't communicate with Roberta regularly at all, but always those communications are tender and valuable. Deb, again, we don't communicate much. We have very busy separate lives, but we pick up right where we left off. When either of us are struggling, where we reach out right away. I would add in now, women that I'm facilitating better relationships with would be my Boston University cross-country and track teammates. Lots of them, I have them all on my email list. They comment, some more than others, on everything I share. It's wonderful. And those are some pretty strong and powerful connections. So where am I with friends? I don't have many friends. If I were to have, a cocktail party at my house or a campfire in my yard, I could immediately right away invite Renee, Lisa, and Pam, and those three would have a blast. I could invite CrossFit friends from Amesbury. I could invite people I work out with, but I don't have a social circle that spans decades like a lot of people I know. I have friend groups that span decades, let me be clear, but I don't have regular relationships with a lot of people. I'm an island sometimes. I made a comment at CrossFit Amesbury a couple of weeks ago about how I'm always the enemy on the school board, like I'm always the one that everyone's mad at and all. And Braden, one of the owners, looked at me and he goes, there's a part of me, Barb, that thinks you kind of like that. I've thought about that for a long time since he said it often. I've thought about it often. That I do often right away set myself up to be a bit of an outsider, to be the squeaky wheel or the, oh no, here she comes, or the person whose comments are received with eye rolls and dirty looks. Sometimes I think I put myself out there like that so that the underdogs in the world and the people that feel invisible know that somebody hears them and sees them. I don't know. It's fall, so I'll give you a little heads up on what's coming next. It's cross-country season. It's running. It's the anniversary of when I got suspended from the school district. November and December is when I went through losing my job. It's also my anniversary of starting CrossFit, which is a huge trauma response to losing my running connections. I have lots to share. stories that I've told part of or alluded to, not done a deep dive into it. And I'm ready to do that. Won't be easy to hear, but it's a process I need to go through because I can no longer be silent. I am tired of keeping the secrets. In this very blog post, when I talked about my sisters, again, it was my job to keep a secret for a long time. No more fawning and freezing. I need to use my words carefully and I need to grow from it, but I also need to ask myself, why are relationships with people like this so important to me? And that was a question that came up with Carolina. Why do I feel I'm so dependent on these kinds of people? And I know my fear over losing Roy was massively induced on dependence upon him and not being able to fathom life, not having him in it. I think that was stemmed around the Molly loss and the job loss. I lost so much helping him. To end it, it would feel like all those losses were for naught. And that's a bit true. I would love to hear more from my listeners on their thoughts on my podcast. I really am imploring you all to start leaving comments. Either respond to my emails or comment on the website. I'm also reworking a lot of my blogs. So on my emails now, I have reworked blogs that I wrote to correspond with old episodes and such. I will put myself out there for this. I would love more interaction on the podcast, more comments. I have my small handful of people that comment and respond and listen to these pleas, P-L-E-A-S, please. I'm in a funny place. I have someone in my life that I'm going to go visit. They're in the hospital right now, and I'll just leave this person nameless right now. But when I shared with Gracie just yesterday that I was going to go visit this person, she's like, why? Why do you keep this person in your life? And a part of her is right. There's a lot of reasons I shouldn't, but we have connections socially and politically and professionally that make that difficult. So I have to exercise boundaries. Sisters and friends, right? We live in a time where we don't have gray area anymore. If you don't agree with somebody on everything, then you're enemies. And there's no room for middle talk. Thanks for listening to my little intro. Thanks for listening to the replay. And thank you for listening to my summation of the loss of these two women in my life and how, like my picket fence analogy, I have equal amounts sadness and relief over being free from the constraints and pressures of these friendships. I wish both of these women well. Be good to yourself. Choose wisely when you're making friends and don't allow people to mistreat you. Stand tall. Be good to someone else. Be a good friend. Don't try to control and manipulate others. And as always, have a good day, everybody. Hey, thanks for listening and supporting the podcast. Feel free to leave a review and share my stories with your friends. Please reach out with your own stories, as I love connecting with my listeners. If you would like to get to know Molly, head over to mollybfoundation.org to see what she is all about. If you want to see what I'm up to next, you can find me on Instagram at barb_444, on Facebook as Barb Higgins, and at my website, 1000tinysteps.com. And while you're there, sign up for my newsletter, a weekly way to find out what's up in the life of Barb Higgins.